Hey there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Stories of Gumption. It's episode 21. So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when it is that you are listening to this episode. Hope you're enjoying yourself today. Hope you're about to enjoy this episode. And don't forget, if you haven't done so already, subscribe. Hit that subscribe button, whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, whether Castbox, Google Play, Spotify. Subscribe. You'll get an update every time a new episode comes out, and really appreciate the support. As always, there's also opportunity for sponsorship. If you have a business, a new idea, anything you want to get out to the world, viewership is growing, listenership is growing, and this is a great opportunity for you to get your name out there. We have a couple sponsors who did take care of that opportunity. Some of them have been around since the very beginning of the episode. We want to give them some shout outs real quick. And the OG sponsor of Stories of Gumption, Open Gate Farmstead. As you've heard before from the jingle, they are a stone's throw away from the mighty Ausable River. Open Gate Farmstead is a first-generation farm specializing in free-range poultry, pasture-raised pork, and seasonal produce. Their slogan is simple: happy animals make the healthiest and tastiest product. And all I can say is, in a world where over-processed food is everywhere, it pays to get your food from a local, sourced, small, a good old-fashioned American farm. These guys work very hard on their project. They document everything on YouTube, so if you're interested in seeing their story, check them out on YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram. Again, it's Open Gate Farmstead. Love them. Kavanaugh Realty is sponsor number 2. They're hanging in there, and we appreciate their support. They're doing great things in the Champlain Valley real estate community. They are a local independent real estate company, not a corporate one or anything like that. We are blessed to have tons of great real estate agencies and agents and brokers in the Champlain Valley, but Kavanaugh Realty has been doing a great job. We really appreciate their support of this podcast. They're local. They're helping people buy and sell their homes. Reach out to them today. Check them out on the web, on social media. #LocalMatters. Also have one more sponsor. These two are fantastic. Zach and Kate Hoyt, everybody. They provide professional and economic cleaning solutions to residential and commercial structures. They specialize in window cleaning, floor care, carpet extraction, and auto and boat detailing. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about Sparkle Clean. SPAR-KIL-KLEEN. They are at 518-578-2931. Find them on Facebook, Instagram, at Sparkle Clean. That's Zach and Kate Hoyt, everybody. Check them out. They do amazing things. Today, I'm with a great friend of mine, colleague, coworker, and inspiration to me in many ways, Corey Parent. He balances the great job of being a client advisor like myself for Hickok and Boardman Insurance Group, but he also is a politician in Vermont. He's been a state representative, and now he's a state senator. He's a father. He's a proud husband, and he is a workhorse. I really enjoyed today's conversation with him because he kind of taps into something that I think is critical to life, and it's this concept of creating behaviors and activities that breed success over time. So enjoy episode 21 of the Stories of Gumption podcast. Gumption, defined as initiative, aggressiveness, resourcefulness, courage, spunk, guts, common sense, and shrewdness. Welcome to the podcast. This is Stories of Gumption with your host, Ryan Lee. All right. Today I am with Mr. Corey Parent, very good friend of mine. He's a client advisor at Hickok and Boardman. Shout out to Hickok and Boardman Insurance Group, best in the biz. locally here. We got he is also a Vermont state senator, very impressive for his age. He's a fellow Laurentian. We both graduated from St. Lawrence University. However, he has moved on to the other side of that rivalry, and he is now pursuing his MBA at Clarkson. So we might have to talk about that a little bit. And then, arguably, maybe even the most important, Corey is also a husband and a father. Welcome to the podcast, Corey Parent.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate it. Looking forward to talking with you and your listeners today.
Yeah, man. Well, it's cool because before the podcast, you and I were talking about how we've always kind of known each other through college, but we weren't super tight friends through college, but we stayed connected. We had mutual friends, and it was kind of interesting to kind of follow your path to where you are now and my path to where I am now. And here we are. We both work for Hickok and Boardman, same employer, doing the same job.
Yeah, no, it's neat. And like you said, we have one mutual friend in particular that we're really close to on each side. But, it was neat, a couple years ago when you reached out about potentially coming to Hickok and Boardman, and you and I think at that point got a little bit closer just talking about your path to ultimately accepting the job and through your first couple of years there, which you've done an absolutely fantastic job. And I think the
Well, thank you.
businesses in the Plattsburgh area are going to be lucky to have you help them with their risk management needs.
Yeah. I don't usually go into a heavy plug of Hickok and Boardman, but I mean, for the listeners, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about who we work for and where our offices are, and give them the pitch.
We work for a longstanding company that's 198 years old in the Vermont area, located out of Burlington, Vermont. But we have offices in St. Albans, where I work out of, Stowe, Montpelier, Lyndonville, and over the last couple of years, and I've been with the firm about 4 now. And Northern New York has been a target area for us. My mom and dad are actually from the Brushton area, just past Malone, and I have a lot of family out there. So it became a natural place to start to look. And Plattsburgh was an area we were looking in, and you've helped us expand there. But ultimately, what we do is help businesses, large and small, meet their risk management needs, not just placing insurance, but really working with risk management and helping them reduce their insurance costs through best practices in safety and claim management, and really an all-around risk management firm. I think far too often people think about insurance as something that they buy every year, but realistically, I think your insurance agent is just as important as your accountant and your lawyer. When you think about it, when your business burns down or you have an injured employee or something happens, it's how good of a product your insurance agent put you in that'll ultimately could mean the difference between a full recovery or not. They're the ones when stuff really hits the fan that you need to make sure they do a good job. So some people don't look at us in that manner, but I think successful businesses see their insurance company and as someone as vital as their lawyer and their accounting and their other servicing teams that they have for their businesses.
It's so true. It's so true. It's so funny too, man. I mean, when I when I first really started thinking, all right, I think I'm actually going to be working in insurance. I had the conversation with my wife Lauren, and I'm just like, is this really what I'm going to do? Like, if you'd asked me in high school, Ryan, do you want to be an insurance broker, insurance agent? And I probably would have first thrown up in my mouth, and then been like, no way, that sounds like the worst career ever. And now that I'm older, I've got an MBA behind me, so I've got that experience and education, but also the lessons that I've learned from the Hickok and Boardman interviewing process, and now being with them for going on 2 years. I'm nerding out on this industry. It is so cool, especially from the commercial side. Like the puzzle that you're putting together for a client to help make sure that their needs are met to the best price and ability, but also service model is I'm nerding out on it.
No, it's fantastic. And, with my other career, which we'll get into, I know later in the podcast, about being a state senator, one of the I see a lot of dovetails between my two careers, and the part that I love so much is the opportunity just to go in and learn and talk to these businesses and learn what they do, and as we're building the risk management and insurance package for them, but understanding every intricate detail of their business, and it's just cool to see what type of employers we have up here. I'll use North Country broadly as North Country, New York, and North Country, Vermont. But it's really fascinating, the products and the businesses we have up here that I don't think people always realize that we do have.
Oh, for sure. And you mentioned the point of North Country, New York, and North Country, Vermont. I like that because as someone who's been commuting and really like, if you take the ferry out of the equation, it's like a half-hour trip. But we put up this massive wall, this barrier in our heads because there's a body of water in between us. But the connectivity of the Champlain Valley, I mean, we share the same news station. We share the same, it's like the same exact types of communities, but for some reason, there seems to be a barrier, a default barrier in people's minds, I think, a lot initially when they think of Vermont versus Northern New York.
Well, it's true, and the unique piece is I actually, in my Senate district, represent Alberg, Vermont, which is um, a peninsula that most people don't realize actually is not even connected to the continental United States. They're connected by land to Canada, but they have part of Lake Champlain going up their west side and part of Lake Champlain going up their east side. And there's a community there that, from an identity perspective, I think identifies with both. A lot of their kids go to high school in Vermont. A lot of their kids go to high school in Rouse's Point, and they've done a good job for them. It's not even a ferry; it's a bridge that connects the two communities and the two states, and it's and they see more of it than maybe I would out of St. Albans or maybe you out of Plattsburgh. But there definitely is a common element to our communities and who we are.
Yep, for sure. For sure. Well, yeah, we'll probably find an opportunity to dive back into insurance a little bit. But for the listeners who don't know you, give them a little bit of your background. So, because you have a really interesting story, and I want to get into the gumption piece of it. But getting to know you, you got a cool story, man. You came from northern Vermont, and then tell them the rest.
Sure.
Tell the people the story.
So I grew up in St. Albans, Vermont. A town. There's actually two communities: St. Albans City and St. Albans Town. But I grew up in the city of St. Albans. Went to Bellows Free Academy over here, the high school. Ended up at St. Lawrence University. I was deciding at the time between Clarkson and St. Lawrence, and when I stepped on that St. Lawrence campus, I knew it was home immediately. And I went over that way because, like I said, my mom and dad and my grandparents at the time lived. My parents were from a half an hour from the Canton Potsdam area, and my grandparents were there. And in my mind, it was a great place to go to a good school and be 2.5 hours away from home, but half an hour from grandma if I wanted a home cooked meal. So
That's perfect.
so for me, I head over there and really, I think really blossomed at St. Lawrence. St. Lawrence was, as a great school where I immediately felt at home and felt like I could make an impact. And, I got involved, in a couple of organizations there, helped bring back a fraternity in a very positive way. I know sometimes Greek life gets a negative light, but I met some of my best friends in that fraternity, including our mutual friend Danny, and had a great time. And it was ultimately through there that my sophomore year, some of the courage with the encouragement of some of my fellow Beta brothers, and I was ran for and elected Thelmo president at St. Lawrence, which is president of the student body, and did that for a year. And to me, I learned an incredible amount outside of the classroom. I look back at my St. Lawrence experience, and I had an incredible experience in the classroom, but the experiences I had outside of the classroom really shaped me for where I am. In that role, I got to serve on the board of trustees for a year. I got to be in regular meetings with the president of the university. I got to be on a committee that was called ISAC at the time, but it was the Institutional Strategic Assessment Committee. I ultimately ended up on the committee that designed the new dorm building and placed it where we did and redid the quad. I got to do a lot of cool things outside the classroom that I don't know necessarily a lot of students got to do, and learn from so many people. When I was on the board of trustees, this was 2010. We were just coming out of the recession, but our endowment was down. There were decisions to be made. Watching people who were CEOs of, you know, GE Africa and CEO of Priceline.com and many other impressive business leaders make decisions. And even though I didn't have a vote on that board, to be able to sit in those meeting rooms and watch them make those decisions and the process they went through was an educational experience that I don't think I could have gotten anywhere else. And
I can only imagine. That's incredible.
yeah, and so at 19 years old, 20 years old, I'm sitting there, watching that, and just learning. And then the cool part too is we had $1 million budget as a student government at the time there, and overseeing that and the team that we funded all the campus organizations. So ACE got the credit for the entertainment, but they were coming to us and working with us on how to get their budgets funded and what type of stuff they were going to do. And it was all a really neat experience, and it actually parlayed into a couple of internships for me. I interned my spring break 1 week of my sophomore year at Goldman Sachs in New York City's in their securities division, which led to a summer internship between my junior and senior year of college, which led to a job offer when I went back to campus my senior year at St. Lawrence with a job offer in municipal bond sales at Goldman Sachs. And probably didn't have the typical senior year experience, worrying what I'm going to do next. I kind of just plugged into that and knew I was off to New York City after graduation. And so, 6 weeks after
What
graduation, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, what? So I feel like I see a lot of similarities to you, just in your upbringing, kind of North Country, small town guy, local athletics, local activities, and you're doing things with the municipality growing up as a kid, and then you go to St. Lawrence. I had a very similar experience, kind of this welcome to the real world, welcome to the big show kind of thing, experience at St. Lawrence, and I gained a lot. But then you're about to go to New York City for your first job after college. Like, what was going through your mind when that really sunk in? Because for me, I'm pretty sure I'd be freaking out
Yeah, I mean,
as a North Country kid, going, "Wait, do I really know what I'm about to do? Like, this is awesome, New York City, the Big Apple, right?" But um, I'd probably be pretty nervous.
yeah, I mean, I definitely think, I always say I've been someone who's been able to handle stressful situations well, like the duck with the feet are pedaling real hard, but, looks calm on top. And I'd be lying if I was saying I wasn't nervous at the time. When I interned at Goldman for the summer, I didn't particularly like the city. I liked doing the work and um, was learning a lot, and it was a good experience. And I thought, first when I got the job offer, I was like, well, I don't want to live in New York City, so where can I live? And I spent some time in Hoboken, New Jersey, and ended up looking for something a little bit outside the city there to live in. That was, I always thought it was much more like a Burlington, if you will, which was the big
Oh,
city
nice.
growing up,
Yeah.
and and did that. And I thought that that helped in part of the transition. But ultimately, I didn't stay at Goldman Sachs long term because of that. I think for someone, I don't think I've ever been built to be someone who can be defined by one role. And, I thought, 80, 100-hour work weeks, while, I was learning a lot and it was a good experience, never really gave me that satisfaction of what I wanted to be doing. And I know we get into millennials and people talk down our generation, they sit there and go, what are millennials doing? What, they can't necessarily just go to work, but I do think we need to have meaning in our work. And Ryan, I mean, I was a kid, my parents worked hard, but, we didn't come from a ton of money. They moved to Vermont, to get out of Moira at that time when there were really no jobs before I was born. And, for me is I would say a middle class kid, but not in, but nowhere near an upper middle class kid. Um, an opportunity at Goldman Sachs was just one I couldn't refuse. To me, there was always like a 5-year plan. If I could just go 5 years and save money and be able to move back home, I'd be in a good spot. But I ultimately made it through my first winter, and my boss one day, I just I started looking for jobs back home in Vermont because my wife now at the time and I were dating, and we were meeting once a month in Albany because it was halfway point between Burlington and New York City, and she's a nurse and couldn't find a job in New York. So just between
That's tough.
yeah, and
That's tough.
between the personal stuff and the work, and I kind of bet on myself. I was like, you know what, if I can get back to Vermont with this experience and get a good job and anything that was closely to something that I was interested in doing, that opportunities potentially could arise. Now, I never thought I would have Goldman Sachs type opportunities, but a good, comfortable North Country living opportunities, and I ended up finding a job very shortly. I started looking in January. I had a job offer back at Fletcher Allen at the time, but now the University of Vermont Medical Center, doing some finance and policy work for them. And so one day in February, I looked at my boss, whose name was Paul, which is ironic because Ryan and I work for a guy named Paul now. And I go, Paul, I'd love to have a conversation with you, today after work if we can. And so, and he's like, sure. And, he grabbed me afterwards. And as we were walking to the office area, the conference room to have a conversation, he goes, so how do you like living in the city? And I looked at him and I go, I really don't like it. And we got into a conversation. He goes, it's something you're gonna have to decide as you get older is, where are you going to be happy with your family and da, 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 da. And I go, honestly, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. And I gave him my notice right then and, there. And Goldman doesn't do the nice thing where they let you serve out the 2 weeks. You get walked right up to HR at that point and shown the door. So,
Yep. Yep. That's pretty common though in that industry.
yeah. So, even though I wasn't going to competitor, so I was pretty prepared. My desk was cleaned out. I knew that was coming. So, that was the end of my Goldman trip, and I moved home and, worked for Fletcher Allen and started to get involved in our community. And that was 2013. And in 2014, I decided to run for the Vermont legislature in my hometown, and ultimately was successful in beating an incumbent and serving my first of 2 years in the Vermont House. And for your listener, especially on the New York side, they might be sitting there going, how does he have a business career and a political career? There are conflicts of interest and ethics and all the things that pop up. But in Vermont, we have a part-time citizen legislature. We have no staff, individual office staff. I don't have an office like, maybe your assemblyman or your state senator
Yep.
might. And
Yep.
we make a whopping $700 a week for the 16 weeks a year we're in the legislature. So no one can survive probably on $12,000 a year. So that's why
Yep.
we just, it's an old fashioned legislature that way. And but it provides me the opportunity to serve in both roles that I do.
That's cool. That's real cool. So, you must have had this this interest since being the president of the student body at St. Lawrence. But at what point in time did you say, "Yeah, this is the right time. This is the right public office. This is the right, combo of things. I'm going to do this." How'd that go through your mind or your train of thought?
It really came down to the issues that I felt were important at the time, and still feel are some of the critical issues facing my state. As somebody who, you know, Ryan, I lucked out that I had the job offer at Goldman out of St. Lawrence. I don't know what my job offers would have been in Vermont right out of college, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
A lot of young people are leaving. I was someone who made the bet to move back home. We still aren't doing a great job of keeping our young people here. It's very expensive, to rent high here. Property taxes are high here. But that spring that I moved home and was just starting to reconnect with I had been involved in local politics in high school, helping out people. And, it really was the state representative at the time voted for about $200 million in tax increases, which on a New York scale may not seem big, but at the time, Vermont's budget, non-federal dollars were about, $1.5 billion. So to have $200 million in increasing in revenue, everything from a gas tax to clothes, taxes on clothing, they were really running up the charges in my mind. And I thought, this isn't the direction our state ought to be going when it's already too expensive to live here, and we're struggling to get businesses to come here and struggling to get young people to build their lives here. And I actually started shopping when I called for a candidate. I started going to the, local parties meetings. I'm like, well, who's running for this office? Who can I help get elected? I've worked on campaigns in the past. I don't think I'm ready to run, but who's
That's funny. That's like kind of a similar story to a previous guest on the this podcast, Janet Dupree,
yeah,
who she's our past assemblywoman for this district in New York,
yeah.
and she actually spent 41 years in public service, and it was definitely a full time plus some job for her, but. I go into this just because it's interesting that you tell the story as, oh, I was just looking to try and help get somebody else elected. That's exactly what she was trying to do. But it's funny how the power of doing that well and being known for your abilities can actually get you put on the stage instead.
Yeah, and it's funny, no one, it became clear by the end of that spring, that summer, that no one else was really interested in running for that job. So, I started to have conversations. Well, what about me? You know what I mean? People ask the questions, well, maybe you should consider it. And I thought, well, maybe. And I was like, you know what? I like this kind of work. I've, been student body president at St. Lawrence. I was class president in high school. That I've always kind of found my way into roles that like this. And I was like, what can I do to give back? And I thought it was, an interesting opportunity. And it became clear there was a real opportunity to run and win at the end of that fall before the 2014 election year. And and we decided to run, and we worked hard. I mean, we knocked on every single door in my district twice. Me personally, not like campaign volunteers, not other staffers, among other things. But in that whole process, I really got to know my hometown and my community, those who supported me and those who didn't, really well, and really build a relationship with them that has allowed me in that career. And then I was someone, after I got elected, we do 2-year cycles in Vermont. So I have a 2-year term. And, I went door to door my first off campaign summer, and talked to everybody again. And then into my reelect, every door twice again. And so over a span of 3 years, I knocked on most people's doors in this community 5 times, and just got to know them. And, they'd invite me in to show me the addition they just did to their house, or they redid their kitchen. And we just had a lot of amazing conversations. And it's neat how far away from the partisan politics the conversations were. They're just about what's going on in the state of Vermont, what are we doing locally, how things were going. And it was a really good experience. And I had a great time. I'd honestly probably still be in the House, but for one of our state senators retiring right before the 2018 election. And I jumped into that race, it's a much different. You can't get to every door in the county, but we still got to 5 to 10,000 doors between me and some other folks. And I went out to a lot of the rural towns, which had never really seen their state senator, and have started building those same relationships that I did here in St. Albans 5-6 years ago now.
That's crazy. That's certainly I've had a handful of people on this podcast who have political office and campaigning experience. It it seems like the story is the same regardless of the size of your your position and your geographic area, but boy, that takes some gumption to wake up every day and know how much you have ahead of you to get your message out there, meet your potential constituents or current constituents, and just that's a long day. And I can't even imagine doing it with another professional career that you had to balance as well.
Yeah, I mean, my typical day during a campaign is up at 5 a.m., get ready. There's a if anybody knows St. Albans, there's a busy four-way intersection. I'd try to get there for about 6:30 in the morning, especially in the fall time of the campaign. Wave to traffic for holding my sign for about an hour or two in the morning. Head off to work for my day job, as you will, sell insurance and do all that. And then when the office closed down, 4:35, usually change real quick, grab a quick bite to eat, and then it's out to a community event or out to when I was running for the House, it was if I could do 40 doors a night, I knew I was in good shape. And then spending Saturdays and knocking, try to do about 100 doors on a Saturday. And yeah, I mean, it's fast paced, it moves quick, but it's really a lot of fun.
Wow. Yeah. We've been kind of, you've been talking about your story here, and there's certainly examples of gumption throughout it. But I'd like to actually ask you the question that I ask most guests, and that is, what does gumption actually mean to you?
To me, it's about doing the little things that, in my short time at 29 years old, I've found to be successful. And I think successful in whatever you do is doing a lot of the little things right. When I played local sports and coached, it was the fundamentals, if you will. And I see a similarity in both my jobs, but is it making the number of cold calls I got to make every day? Is it knocking on the same amount of doors I got to knock on every day? And it amazes me how quickly successes stack on one another. And that doesn't mean there aren't bad days. I mean, Ryan, there are days you can make 100 phone calls and you get nowhere, where there's days you can make 10 and pull a lot of progress out of them. Same thing with knocking on doors or talking to voters. I can go um, a long stretch where people are pretty negative and, we're not going to vote for you. We don't agree with your stance here. And, and I know it's hard, but you take some of those things personally, because you don't look at yourself as a bad person, but some people maybe look at your political affiliation and immediately judge without having a conversation. So I think being able to continue to do the little things, even when things aren't going well, and just trust in the process. I think to me, gumption is also, my dad one time said to me, he goes, "How do you do the state representative job?" And I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "You got 55% of the vote or so." And he goes, "That means 45% of the people didn't want you to win." And I go, "Yeah, that's true. But in my line of work, that's a really good 45, 55, 45 is really, really good." But yeah, I mean, it's doing a job where 40% at least, and that's if you're like most popular in the country, don't like what you're doing. So I think being able to continue to do little things, know why you're doing them, and trust in a process. I think there are so many talented people out there who haven't built a process and don't have a routine, if you will, that never quite make it. Whereas I would say I'm mediocre talent, but able to really just build a process and trust in it, and trust in continually doing the same thing and making adjustments when it doesn't work, and trust that process when days aren't good. And it's amazing how you can start stacking successes.
Yeah, I had a real I don't know if transformation is the right word, but I had a real like epiphany when I came to terms with the fact that my career is sales.
Yeah.
And I feel like I had this like I don't know if it's our culture or what it is, but I had this thing in the back of my mind, as I was the director of the Boy Scouts. I was like, no, I'm not in sales. I'm a fundraiser.
Yeah.
That's different, But like, I had this epiphany one day that, you know what, actually, sales is in everything we do, from a job interview to convincing a friend, or somebody in a debate, or an argument, or making a deal for your car. Like if you're buying a car and you're trying to get, there are so many life examples of sales. And once I wholeheartedly jumped into that and recognized that this is actually exactly what I want to do. This is exactly what I love, because there's so many opportunities to meet people. My point in saying this is, it seems like you have wholeheartedly accepted the awesomeness that is sales, because it's you're selling yourself to your constituents. You're selling a great company and product with Hickok and Boardman, but I think it also, at the root of it, the best sales people are people who can manage to replicate over and over patterns of behavior that allow them, despite the results of that day, slowly build their snowball, so to speak, of just general life success. So your snowball has obviously a Hickok and Boardman piece, has the political piece, you have a family piece, and you have these behaviors that have made you not lazy about it. They've made you gumptious about it, right?
Yeah. No,
Like,
and that's true. And it's amazing how much people overlook those small steps. I mean, it's funny. Every election I've been in, people say this is going to be a nail biter. Corey's got a, he's run an okay race or a good race, and he may not be able to win. But I've actually never been in a close election. From a percentage point, I've always won pretty handedly. And I think everyone's always shocked by the margin of victory and sales. But I think it wasn't anything I did. It's not a speech I gave. We don't, we're not on the TV. We don't run TV ads, or else you'd see them in Plattsburgh. It's that slow building support 40 doors at a time. It's, in our insurance industry, it's making those phone calls and those meetings, and the opportunity to convert business. It's amazing. It's always been amazing to me how small steps add up to big leaps.
absolutely, absolutely. And it's the approach you take too,
Yep.
right? Like the quality approach to it.
Yep.
When I talk to people about, they ask me what my job is like, and I talk about, yeah, I spend a lot of time on the phone, but my approach is, I'm just looking to meet people.
Yeah.
I'm looking to build my network, and to offer something that I'm 100% confident is a solution
Right.
for the right person. It's not going to be a solution for everyone, but
And
it's
yeah.
yeah.
No, it's good. I mean, even, and from my political angle, people go, "What do you say at the door?" And I go, "Hi, I'm Corey Parent. I'm going around the neighborhood today saying hi, and I'm seeing if there are any issues on your mind you'd like to share with me." And amazingly, 80% of the time, most people are busy with their lives. They don't have something, and I leave the leave behind, and I go, "Well, here's my palm card. Tells you why I'm interested in running for state senate. If you have an opportunity, would love it if you could shoot me an email or give me a phone call if you could think of issues that you care about." Now, a lot of them don't, but I think just that opening of, wow, he came to my house, and instead of immediately jumping into a platform, he asked, "What do I care about?" How, you know what I mean? And
Yep.
honestly, I look at my job in that role. There are so many issues that come up in the legislature that you don't campaign on, that you don't think about, but it's kind of knowing how your constituents feel on a number of issues and way they would look at issues, and try to use those conversations you've built over the years or months, and then make your best estimate of where your constituents would like to see you push that piece of legislation or have that conversation. And I think that's the rewarding piece, is when you know what your constituents want, and when you know what um, your clients want, and how they want to be treated. I think that's helpful. Granted, you're not right 100% of the time. Like I said, I'm in a job where, if a constituent doesn't agree with a lot of my votes, sits there and goes, wow, they don't represent me. I'd say, through the conversations, I do my best, and I feel like I've always represented the majority of my constituents, and that's how that game works.
Yep, exactly. Early on in my nonprofit career with the Boy Scouts, and there's a lot of different versions of this training piece, but the rule of 7, you might even know where I'm going with this, but you've certainly, whether you realized it or not, have been implementing the rule of 7 in your campaigns. I'm sure you're doing it with Hickok and Boardman as well, but the rule of 7 essentially at its root is saying don't ever ask for something without having 7 touch points with whomever it is that you're looking to ask something from. So whether that's be an opportunity to actually become their agent for insurance, or actually become their senator, your touch point is 6 a.m. roadside. They're seeing the Corey Parent logo.
Yep.
Later they're getting a phone call. Touch point number 2. Then later they're getting somewhere down the road a visit. Touch point number 3, and you see the pattern here.
Yeah.
Eventually you're getting that familiarity where people realize, oh wow, this guy's legit. Like, this guy actually cares, and they've found that roughly the rule of 7, give or take 1 or 2, it's the marketing effort, so to speak, that needs to make you familiar with the brand, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's so true. I mean, it's one of the things I wanted to do in my political career. And I actually think it dovetails well into what Hickok and Boardman does. Is I don't want transactional relationships. I want, you know what I mean? I want real relationships,
Exactly.
and,
Yeah.
and so many times I found in politics, the politician shows up when they want your vote, when they want something at a ribbon cutting. I'll show up to community meetings in some of these small communities, and I'll sit in the back of the room. And I think people, when they're walking out, I'll talk to a handful, and they're like, "We didn't know you were here." And I go, I don't need to be recognized. I just want to be here. If you guys have questions, I can answer them if it's something comes up in the meeting. But I just want to let you know, like, I like to show up to the meetings and just sit in the back and listen.
Yep.
I don't have to be the show. Last night's a good example. This weekend is our Franklin County Field Days over here in Vermont, which would be similar to your county fairs in New York. And I did the booth last night. We had I went with the state representative from one of the towns, and we parked next to a couple we knew, grabbing dinner, and we just ate next to them and talked to them for 30 minutes. And we stopped by a couple of the businesses we know on display, and then we went into the beer tent for the truck pulls, and had a beer or
Nice.
two. But people were, some people were coming up to us being like, "Oh, election year, you guys in here for votes, or you already got my vote, you don't need to talk to us." And we looked at them, we go, "It's not an election year. We're not here for votes." And they go, "Well, what? Why are you guys doing?" I go, "We just like to be out and about. Let you know, we're just like you guys, and if you got issues, we're glad to talk to them now. But maybe just seeing us might remind you to reach out to us another time." And so I think being visible and out is beneficial as well.
Yeah.
And not always trying to be looking for that vote. I think people always see when you said, "Man, do I really want my life to be sales?" People have this negative image of sales, of politicians, of so many careers. And, I think when it's done right, people see the value in them. And I think it's building those relationship driven, bonds, and not just this transactional relationship where we just use each other constantly.
Exactly. The classic sales example that 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 gives people this gut feeling of detest towards sales people is that cold call when you're the recipient, but the person's expecting you to buy a radio subscription or something that moment, and you're like, I don't know you, I don't know where you're from, and that's the frustrating sales example. But when you're to your point, when you're doing it right, people know exactly who you are. They know exactly what you're about. And if you did it exceptional, they know exactly how you can help them.
Right.
And at that point, by the time you ask them if they're prepared to become a client and take the relationship to the next level, or a constituent in your case in politics, they've already made their decision, and they made their decision a while ago, but now it's just a formality.
Well, and honestly, there's a good book that one of our colleagues had told me I should read when I first started at the agency, and I forgot who the author is. It's in my office at the insurance agency, not in my home one. But the book was called Getting Naked, and it was this small consulting firm out on the West Coast that would, in their first meeting, go out and immediately start trying to solve a problem for their prospect, and then they would get to like that point where they'd be like, okay, and then and the prospect like just all of a sudden wanted that problem completely solved, and that's when they were like, well, we're glad to continue to work on it, but you know what I mean. But like they said, they go, it's okay to invest a little bit of already starting to work with people, and show them what you can do, before you ask for the sale or the vote or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. A good example, out of St. Albans, we don't tend to have internet or broadband issues, but in a lot of the rural communities I represent, we do. And at the time, when I first ran for the Senate, I was ranking member of the Energy and Technology Committee in the Vermont House, and um, I was going to these doors and people were complaining about internet service, and so um, I knew the people at the company that was the provider in that area, and so when people would complain, I'd call that next morning. I'd be like, "Hey, I got complaints at these addresses about your service. I'd really appreciate it if you guys could be better." And really, these people say they're calling and no one's getting back to them, and they've been trying to get service and so on and so forth. And the company would reach out to the people and be like, "Hey, we got a phone call from Representative Parent today. He said he had a conversation with you. How can we help you fix it?" Like, I went up the chain, and that wasn't even like a political policy thing. It was just me calling a company and being like, and them knowing that, the clout I had when I was on the Energy and Technology Committee in the House, they're like, "Yeah, we probably don't want to, if Corey's hearing a lot of complaints, if they're not taken care of, he's going to address it in the legislature if he has to." And they started solving problems for those people. And I don't know how many of those people ended up voting for me, but I have a pretty good idea a lot of them did, because I was already providing solutions to them without, you know what I mean, being their senator, if you will.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. One thing I'm going to shift gears slightly here, but we talked about it briefly in the very beginning in your intro, and certainly before recording the actual podcast here. But you have taken it upon yourself to pursue an MBA,
Yeah.
which is probably another gumptious decision. As someone who has done that while working a job, I know what that's about. And I did successfully complete that program, and I'm so much better for it. But tell me a little bit about the decision making there.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, this past winter, I was sitting there going, God, I have a pretty busy schedule. My wife and I had our first child. He's a year old now. We plan on having more, and education's always been important to me. I always feel like going to St. Lawrence and gave me a lot of the leg up that I've gotten so far in my early life, and I felt like I've also gotten to the point where in self reflection I can be like, you know what, I could sharpen these skills, and I'd like to have now knowing what I know 6, 7, 8 years into a professional life, what can I do to really hone some of these skills. Like I said, I just turned 29 a few weeks ago, as I'm getting into my early 30s, to really capitalize on the experiences I have and to get more when I'm in some of these meetings. And I started researching. I was looking at Masters of Public Administration, Masters of Business Administration, and obviously I knew I probably couldn't do a classroom setting. I couldn't take time off from work. It'd have to be an online setting. And I kept coming back to the MBA and some of the skills that in the classes that I would have to take. And to me, kind of rebring that like I said, bringing back to the fundamentals. If anybody's ever played sports, it's in the middle of the season. Sometimes the coach has you do some of the drills you did in the first part of the season, just because things may have gotten sloppy or not have been perfect, and I'm not saying that's where my work was, but I just felt it was a good time to re-engage in the fundamentals and spend a little
Hmm.
time each night, reconnecting and rebuilding skill sets and sharpening skills. And it's been good. I'm doing it slow. I probably won't get it done in 2 years, but a class at a time. Like it's 40 doors at a time. Just really re-engaging and thinking and challenging yourself and sharpening skill sets that you don't always take the time to during your career. And I just felt it was a really good time for me to do this. And I'm hopeful it'll make me a better public servant. I'm hopeful it'll make me a better insurance agent, and ultimately a better person, I think. But and I'm in the middle of my first class, but it's already good to just re-engage. And I just happen to be in managerial economics as my first class, and I was an economics major at St. Lawrence. But it was good to re-engage in this. But some of the decision making, I see it from the public policy perspective when I'm making these decisions, but also being able to put myself in where our clients are and what the challenges they have to do when they're building, um, manufacturing a product and everything that they have to do. And I'm just one small piece of it, but how I can, be, a critical piece and taking some stress off of them in the risk management area. But it's neat to re-engage. And I think it's so critical no matter what we do and whatever career we do. Most of us who are licensed, whether it's insurance or finance or real estate, you have to do your continuing ed. And I don't think people always get the most out of continuing ed. I think they take the class because they have to, but I think the whole concept behind it is how to constantly be getting better at what you do and sharpening those skills and taking the time to step out of the hamster wheel, if you will, of the next sale or the next vote, and say, how do I get better when we actually execute the deal? And to me, earning an MBA is part of that process. It's just sharpening skills at a time in my career where I think I have a lot of application to what's going on at a good amount, and being able to make sure that moving forward for the next 30 years of my career, that I'm as best as I can be personally.
It's a beautiful thing when you can come into, at least from my experience, and it sounds like you're taking it the same way with the same mindset, but it's a beautiful thing when you can apply your professional experience and into the content of the classroom and the MBA curriculum. When at least for me, when I was going to St. Lawrence, I got a ton out of that curriculum and my degree from St. Lawrence. But there's something very, very different about taking your time, not rushing into a master's program, getting some real life experience in the workplace, and then applying those experiences to what you're learning in the classroom again. It's a cool way to learn. And that's what I felt like I got the most real life applicable knowledge from my MBA from versus any other education I've ever had. And I think that's a big piece why.
Well, and it's so true. I mean, whether it's your writing prompts, the homework assignments or the homework assignments, but like, sometimes the discussion prompts, and I'm sure some of my classmates get sick of it, but I really try to view them as through the lens of my Hickok and Boardman job and my state Senate role. And, again, in financial or managerial economics, which is a lot of decision making and how you get there. And I really try to apply those concepts to both roles in my writing and trying to explore what they mean. And did I just miss them as an insurance agent or as a state senator when I've lived this example? But to take that concept and to, like you said, apply it to those real world examples, it helps you understand your job a little bit better and see things from a different angle. And I think that's really rewarding. And like I said, I know I'm busy, but to take the couple hours a week that it takes to just reflect on maybe something you did that week, to pause and to connect it to the curriculum. To me, that's the most rewarding part so far. I've enjoyed that piece of the curriculum so far.
Heck yeah, man. That's awesome. Well, good for you. And I'm sure I'll hear updates as you keep rocking and rolling through that. I'm going to shift gears one last time here. to the Stories of Gumption podcast rapid fire section. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right, man. I'm gonna rifle off some questions here for you, and I just want you to think of the best answer. Is you don't have to rush yourself, but then he's gonna go a little quicker. So, first one, question number one: what's a book you would gift to a friend, and why?
Start with why. It's a book I read a while ago, and I think too many of us again get into the minute detail, and we talked a lot about that today. But ultimately, why the bigger picture of why you're doing something and what's driving you, I think is critical in anything.
I feel like I've heard of that book. I don't remember who wrote it. Do you happen to remember who wrote that book?
Simon Sinek.
Yes.
Yep.
Start with why.
Yeah, but
Simon
it
Sinek.
talks about like Apple or Google or what it is, and it's this ecosystem, and then the product's part of it. And to me, that start with why. Why is it important to buy insurance from Hickok and Boardman, or why is it important that I'm your state senator? The small details get you there, but you still have to have that grander vision of why you're doing what you're doing.
Exactly. I like it. I got this long list of of books that I need to try and catch up on from all these different podcasts. But that's a good one. I actually have heard great things about that book, and I've never picked it up. So I'm definitely going to make sure that's on the list. Question number 2. If you were able to put up a billboard anywhere in the world for free, what would you put on that billboard and why?
The smart aleck in me will say no billboards are allowed in Vermont. So
yeah, I was wondering if that was good.
that is one of the cultural differences between our side of the lake and yours. I don't know. I think I would, in the political sense, I'd probably, talk about the issues, but I think I would, I think, in today's light, I would probably have a positive story. I think so many people see so much negative that I think having something positive when someone's driving to work or driving where they are would be helpful to get people in the right frame of mind.
I agree. We need a little more of that. Question number 3. What piece of advice would you give to your 18-year-old self if you could?
The cliche one that I got probably as an 18-year-old, but don't close yourself off to opportunities. Like you never thought I'd be an insurance agent. At 18, I didn't even know what Goldman Sachs was. I think being at St. Lawrence allowed me to take risks. And I think, I tell 18-year-old Corey to take even more risks than you took and to explore more than you did. It's amazing what comes out of the least expected things.
I love it. Here's the last question. It's my favorite question that I ask of every guest. Number 4, if we could assemble a 3-person board of directors to guide and mentor you through the rest of your life, who would you choose and why? They can be alive, deceased, famous, or not. But who would you choose and why?
First one I would choose would be my grandfather. He passed away when I was 2, but had some pretty incredible stories of him. He was raised through the Depression, worked his way up, served in World War II, Alcoa, and I think between just being a family person and that part of my life, having someone, some of the life experiences he had and the hardships he had, to be able to learn more from those, I think would be amazing. So on a personal level, my grandfather, and I actually named my first son after him. So it'd be him on, a business level. I would love to look at some of these people who've just completely shifted the world. But God, I'm trying to think of the best one. I have so many in my mind.
It's hard. I can almost hear your clicking through your Rolodex of this person, this person, this person.
Yeah, so maybe politically, I would go to. I would have liked to have known and worked with that one. That one would probably be a former governor of Vermont, Jim Douglas, who I actually do have a relationship with, but someone who's just always been even keeled and is good at reading situations and is phenomenal on so many levels, and just remembers people and their stories, and years later, remembers me from when I was a 14-year-old kid and just bebopping around trying to help out. I would include him. And then on a business end, there are so many, and I feel like I've had so many good mentors already. I can think of, but you know what, maybe I to not pull on someone famous, would be to continue our accounting professor at St. Lawrence, Brian Staples. I had a good relationship with him, and the things he did. He was an accountant, but in town in Canton, but also owned investment properties and other things. And he really changed my mind on the way to look at investing and some other things. So I think, having someone from that investment perspective, that he did some pretty neat things to have on the board. So none of them ultimately all that famous, maybe governor of Vermont, but I think having people that would look at all those ends and challenge me and feel comfortable challenging me would be pretty neat.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, man, hey, this has been great. We for the listeners here, we actually jumped in nice, bright and early to start a Saturday morning when we recorded this for you, and I can hear your probably your email or something pinging. People are starting to wake up and reach out to you, but I want to give you the opportunity. Thank you again for sitting down with me this morning, my friend. But I also want to give you the opportunity to give a sending message, whether to related to your professional career, politics in general. Now's your chance.
Yeah, well, thank you, Ryan, for having me. I appreciate it. I think this is pretty neat. I think too many times, we look at Steve Jobs' story, or David, or Mark Zuckerberg, or any of these really successful people, but there's a lot of success in this country and in this world that maybe doesn't hit the news all the time. So I think telling stories in local communities is important. But ultimately, my message would be, to anyone out there listening, you're already proving you're a little gumptious by taking the time to listen to this podcast, but continue to learn, continue to develop, take risks. Don't be afraid of failure. I've been more successful coming out of failures in life than probably times when I haven't failed a lot. So I think failure is a good thing as long as you're learning from it. And I think if you're not in a situation where you're failing, you're not being gumptious, if you will.
I love it. Well, that's a great send off. Thank you again, everybody. Don't forget, if you love what you're listening to, if this is your first podcast that you've listened to for Stories of Gumption, or if you've been with us from the very beginning, if you haven't done so already, smash that subscribe button, and you'll get an update every time we put out a new episode. Corey, thank you again, my friend. Excellent episode, very insightful, and until next time, this is Stories of Gumption.